Well, hello everyone. I'm going to give this another shot. I promised myself I was going to do a video every Wednesday, and so far I've failed. I've failed miserably. I did another one, and I posted it, but I went back and watched it and I didn't like at all how it turned out. I'd kind of gone over it before I posted it, and I thought it was okay, but then after watching it all the way through, I just didn't like it. So I deleted that one, and I'm going to try and do it again. I have Steve and Kira in here right now.
Hello.
Hello. They're going to kind of keep me on track, and if I, lose my train of thought, they'll try and interject because I'm not very good at thinking on my feet. But I just wanted to tell another story from my past. And all of these stories kind of tell what shaped me, why I find myself almost 70 years old in my golden years, still wondering, what I want to be when I grow up. No, I just have had so many challenges throughout my life, and the older I got, the more I realized a lot of those were self-inflicted. So I'm going to start out with a story, how I married a man that I really despised at age 17, which is kind of a crazy story. Yeah. I think I was 16 when we met, and I was actually a waitress at a little truck stop in Parowan, which is where I grew up, Parowan, Utah. And he used to come in every morning, I guess, before he went to work to get coffee and pancakes or something.
I realized that.
Yeah. That's how we met. I mean, I kind of knew about him because he was the son of one of my high school teachers. So he had already been in the Navy and was released. He was in there for 4 years. So when I met him, he was 24. He had just got out of the Navy. And he's a pretty good-looking guy, he was part Hawaiian. His mother was full-blood Hawaiian, and he had dark hair and these crystal blue eyes. His eyes were just amazing. And he had a great smile, and he just charmed me, and we ended up dating. And but I found pretty early on that he was very misogynistic, which I didn't even know what that word was back then. But I found that he really didn't care much about my feelings or what was going on. He was not nurturing or anything towards me. And then one night, his parents were out of town, so he actually got margarita mix and made margaritas. I think his cousin and his wife were there too, so it was the four of us, and we got drunk on margaritas. It was my first time ever drinking. Drunk on margaritas, and then he took me out and took my virginity for the very first time. And
Was it consensual?
Well, it was consensual because I just didn't know how to say no.
Right.
I just didn't know how to say no.
And he got you drunk for the first time.
Yep.
Yeah, 24-year-old with a 17-year-old getting her drunk.
Yep. I think I was 16 at the time.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience, meaning that I set a precedent for not a very good sex life for the rest of my life because it was such a bad experience for me. But I just kept going along. I kept, hanging in there with him. And then it was really interesting. I had another boy that was writing me letters. He was from Delta, Utah, and he had met me at a state fair or something, and he was trying to get me to continue to date him. And I kept saying, I'm dating somebody else. And then he convinced me to come and he was going to be the master of ceremonies at a 4th of July celebration in Delta. And so I went and stayed with he and his parents. it's possible I'm getting the dates or the time mixed up. I think maybe Clint and I weren't real hard and heavy at the time. I think that might have been before that. So anyway, I went and spent the weekend with he and his parents, and it was funny because I was working graveyard shift at this truck stop, and I hadn't learned that you got to be able to get sleep during the day, and I wasn't getting any sleep at all during the day, maybe 2 or 3 hours at the very most, and I'd been going on for a long time like that. And when we left, he came and picked me up, and then we had to drive 100 miles to Delta, and then the festivities were that night, and there was a dance and all this fun stuff going on. And as we were standing dancing slow on the dance floor, I literally fell asleep on the dance floor. I fell asleep in his arms, and I remember feeling my knees start to buckle, and then I kind of woke up. I'd probably been close to 48 hours without much sleep.
Because of your work?
Because of work, yeah, because I had worked 2 graveyard shifts and hadn't slept during the day for a couple of days. So then the same thing happened. He took me out to this, supposedly this magic place to park. And if you don't know what parking is, that's where you go find a secluded place and you make out. So we went to this place overlooking his little town, and it was really pretty. And as we were just snuggled up there, I fell asleep again, and then I was woken up I was blowing bubbles out my mouth.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was pretty sad, pretty funny. And then I said, I really think I need to go home and go to sleep.
Stressed out 16-year-old right there.
Yep, definitely. So anyway, then I went home, or he took me home, I think on that Sunday. And then somehow, like I said, I don't remember the timing exactly, but somehow Clint and I got hot and heavy, and this guy's name was Rex Stanworth, and it was little later that after I'll get into that a little later. Hopefully I remember. Remind me to tell you about Rex Stanworth and my mom.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, Clint and I he ended up proposing to me, and then right after he proposed to me, I got a letter from Rex begging me to marry him, and he said, you're really going down the wrong path, because I think he had heard about Clint's reputation, and so he tried to convince me otherwise, but I didn't know how to say no. It was like I would freeze when I thought, I need to stand up for myself. I need to, I don't really like this guy. I don't feel comfortable around him. The sex we were having was horrible. I felt horrible. And in fact, one night he took me out, and we didn't get home until 1:30 in the morning. And it was a school night. And my mom had remarried, so I had a stepdad. And I got home, and I heard my stepdad yell from the bedroom, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I've just been out." And I was kind of a little snot. And he asked me again, and I said, "I've just been out." And he came in and literally smacked me across the face, which is interesting because that's what Clint ended up doing later on. But and then I realized that Roy, my stepdad, had been an alcoholic, and his wife had divorced him because he was abusive to their kids. And so a little bit of that was coming out in Roy. He had been a really good stepfather for a few years, and always chipper, always nice, sweet, but that brought out the worst in him. So even though I don't condone what he did at all, I really don't. I don't think there's ever a reason for somebody to be hit unless it's to save their life for some reason. But I just ran out of the house, and strangely enough, I ran to Clint's house, and I was pounding on the door saying, "Roy just hit me, Roy just hit me." And then my mom came by. She went out and got in the car, and by this time it's 2 a.m, So I finally ended up going back home with her. And so that was pretty weird. So anyway, and then I'm going to try and wrap this up pretty soon.
That's okay. It's really good though.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
very-
Yeah, so after we set our wedding date for, I think it was July 17th or something. So that was right before my 18th birthday. By this time I was 17. We'd been, going together for about a year. And so he had always wanted to get married on a mountain. Now, if this had been a man that I loved, this would have been the most romantic wedding ever, because he wanted to get, there was this cliff he had been to before up Heroin Canyon. I think it was close to Cedar Breaks, and he said, that's really where I want to get married. So the whole wedding party, including my dad, came from Vegas to give me away, which was pretty cool. I felt a little bad for Roy, because he had been the one that was raising me for the last few years. But, like I said, I couldn't afford conflict, so whatever everybody else came up with was what I did. So we were on this mountain at sunrise. It was absolutely beautiful. And I remember as I was getting ready, while I was still at home putting my wedding dress on and everything, I was just crying uncontrollably. And people thought that I was just excited it was my wedding day. But what it ended up being, the reality was I could not believe that God hadn't intervened somehow so I didn't have to marry this man. So it was crazy. So anyway, we ended up getting married, moved into this little tiny house. It was so little that it was on Main Street in Parowan, and the width of it couldn't have been more than maybe 15 feet. So you walked in the front door, and there was just this little narrow living room, hardly big enough to even put a couch or a chair in, and then you walked through another entryway into the kitchen. The kitchen you could barely turn around in, and then through the kitchen you walked into the bedroom, and you had to stand on the mattress to get to the bathroom. That's how little this house was. And I'm not complaining. I mean, like I said, if I'd been in love, it would have been a fun little thing to remember. But we ended up, living in that house for a little while. And then on my 18th birthday, he came home at 11 o'clock that night, drunk, and didn't even remember it was my birthday.
And now he's like 26 at this point.
Yes, he's
okay.
right. He's 26. Didn't remember my birthday. Sorry, I have a runny nose. Allergies. And so I remember crying and saying, "Did you not remember it was my birthday today?" And he goes, "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," as if he really was. But then he just went to bed, fell asleep, and that was the end of that. And then the next thing that happened was New Year's Eve. There was in fact, I was working Brian had a little restaurant called Ferdinand's. It was like a Mexican food restaurant. Really popular place, and I was working there, and they asked me if I could come be a hostess New Year's Eve. And so he decided he was going to go because they were having a big smash party up there, so he was going to go too. So I went, and while he was on the dance floor just having fun, I was acting as hostess. And then right before midnight, I thought, oh, it's time to bring in the new year. And I walked in there to kiss him and bring in the new year, and he was lip locked with another woman. And believe it or not, I was so happy because now I had an excuse to leave. Up until then, I couldn't legitimately, say, well, he's been, there's been infidelity, and he's stepping out on me, so I couldn't, I just couldn't do that. But now I had an excuse. And I don't remember the turn of events. I went to live with my grandma who lived in Cedar City for a little while.
Was there a discussion that night?
Oh, that's right. Good point.
Okay.
Good point. Thanks.
Yeah.
There was not a discussion.
Okay.
We drove down the mountain.
So you just got into the car
Actually,
no
I don't.
conversation.
I think I drove alone. If I remember right, I went down the canyon by myself, and he got a ride down the canyon. And so I remember him coming in the middle of the night and going to bed, and he was still drunk, and so he fell asleep. And the next day, I told him I was leaving him, and he had to go to work, I guess, or no, maybe not work. I don't remember what was going on, but somehow his mom came tearing up in her car. I remember the tires kind of screeching and the gravel kind of screeching in front of the house. And she came running in and said, you can't do this. You can't do this. You know, you'll get through this. It'll be okay. And there had been rumors for years going on that she was having an affair with the school principal. And so she right there admitted it. She says, I've been having an affair with Bruce Decker for years and years and years, you know, but we finally got through it, and now that's over, and you and Clint can get through this. And I said, I don't think so. And I didn't even discuss it with her. She eventually got tired of talking without.
Her mind was made up.
Yeah, yeah. So she ended up leaving, and the next day I think I went to live with my grandma for a little while in Cedar City, and then my brother and his wife were in the military. He was in the Army, and he was just getting ready to get out, and they were moving to Las Vegas. And so I contacted them and asked if there was a way that I could come and live with them in Las Vegas. And they said, sure, you know, because they figured it would, you know, it would help pay the rent. So somehow I ended up in Vegas living with them. But then Clint literally moved to Las Vegas and begged me to come back. And so he was renting a room, and I decided, well, I'll give it another try. I don't have anything else going on. And at the time I was working at a little restaurant, strangely enough, a restaurant called Sambo's, which doesn't exist anymore, thank goodness. But so anyway.
Did you feel like a charm to him again? What?
No.
Not really? It was
not
just,
really.
Again, a feeling of like,
yeah.
Just maybe, yeah. Okay.
Like, I don't want to be a failure. I want to make this work, kind of,
okay.
you know, even though I
gotcha.
You know, I didn't feel it
Makes
at
sense.
all. Yeah. So anyway, we lived together for probably 3 months. And then one time we went out on the lake. One of his friends had a boat, and so we went out to Lake Mead, spent the day on Lake Mead drinking and smoking pot. And then we came back to the house, to one of his friends' homes. And there were a lot of people there. They had a lot of friends, and so there were a lot of people there. And he started getting drunker and drunker and drunker, and I was just so appalled by him. I couldn't take it, and I didn't even want to go home with him. So I told him, I says, I'm going to go stay with Dad tonight. My dad lived in Vegas, and I had spent like a couple of weeks with them as well when I was in between places to live. And so I said, I'm going to go to Dad's tonight. And he came over to me and he goes, oh, you're going to go to Daddy's, huh? Well, you know, something like, here's what I think about that. And he backhanded me across the face, just like my stepdad had, only it knocked me into a wall. I kind of lost my footing. I didn't fall, but I remember stumbling. And everybody just kind of stopped what they were doing and then went back to doing whatever they were doing. You know, nobody came to my rescue. And so I just ran out of there, and I ran all the way to my dad's house. It wasn't very far. And I ran there, and I thought, I'm going to get, maybe I didn't. It's so hard to remember. Maybe I took the car. I think he had a truck, and he let me have his yellow Mustang. So I think I had the car. So I drove to my dad's house. Or no, I hadn't yet. I drove back to the house we were living in, and I grabbed as many clothes as I could carry. And I started leaving the room, and he came in and he goes, you're not going anywhere. Please, please stay. And I said, I can't, I've got to go. And I tried to get past him, and he wouldn't let me past, and he kept, pushing me and finally he pushed me down on the bed. And then, I tried to get up, and by the time we had been fighting and he kept pushing me back down, we were both just too exhausted to even go on, and he just held his hands in his head and just sobbed. He goes, I can't lose you. I don't know why he thought that. Because I later found out that he had been having an affair for the whole time we were engaged. I found that out a lot later.
Because you are a catch mom.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that was not sarcasm.
Yeah.
That was not sarcasm at all. No, you're a catch. People do not want to lose you, of course.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fight.
Yeah. So anyway, and that was one of the last times I saw him. I left. I went to stay with my dad, and then I found my brother got a job and found a girl at his job that was looking for a roommate, and that's how I ended up, finding an apartment to live in. And he ended up filing for divorce. He did all of that. I had to meet him one more time to sign the divorce papers, and we didn't discuss it. We didn't talk. We didn't do anything. That was just the end of it. And now I thought that chapter in my life was completely over.
Is that the rose bushes?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
what I forgot last time. Yeah, so as I was leaving the house, after he finally let me go, I had my hands full of, clothes on, with hangers, and I got to the front door, walked out the front door, and he came up behind me and pushed me into rose bushes that were lining the sidewalk on the door. And I ended up with just cuts on my arms and on my legs that lasted for quite a while. I had scars for a little while. So that was it. I was bleeding, and ended up going to my dad's, and then, like I said, we ended up not having any more association. But now fast forward to 2000, and in Parowan they were having a sesquicentennial reunion celebration where every class that had graduated.
It's like 40 years later. 30
Yes.
years later, something like that?
Yeah.
40 years later? Okay.
Probably, about 30 years later. So for some reason I went with my daughter Chelsea, and we were going to go to that, sesquicentennial, and we were staying at Bryan Head in a little what are they called? Condo. And so we were there, and it was the morning of the sesquicentennial celebration. We got up, we got ready, we drove down the canyon, and as we got there, we noticed that people were coming from the football field. They weren't going to the football field, they were coming from it. And I thought, well, that's weird. It looks like it's over. Did something happen? And as we were walking, I later found out that the clock in our room in Bryan Head was wrong, and so we had completely missed it. But as I was walking towards the football field, I passed this couple, this guy and this girl, and as we got about 15 feet apart, we both stopped and turned around, and it was Clint. It was Clint and one of my...
That's divine intervention.
Yeah, really. One of my girlfriend's older sisters, and I wasn't sure if they were married. I wasn't sure what was going on with him, or whether they were dating or just friends, but they walked by, and he goes, wow, I haven't seen... And then we turned around, walked back to each other, and he says, I haven't seen you in a while. And I says, yeah, it's been a while. So we talked, and he goes, so what's been happening with you? And I said, well, I just got my black belt in Taekwondo. So that was, yeah. So that was meant to be exactly what it was.
Yeah.
That was letting him know that I was no more a victim,
Right.
that I knew how to take care of myself. And that was the end of that story. That was my first introduction into marriage and being on my own for the very first time. And I am just...
It's no wonder you have some trust.
Yep. So that was it. And I've got a few more stories to tell. Not all of them like that, but some of them are fun stories. Some of them are crazy stories. Some of them are embarrassing stories. But that was my first marriage story. So I've gone longer than I wanted to. It's been like 25 minutes. I'm sorry this was so long. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Anything else that I need to say?
I think that covered it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve and Kira.